Live the Truth. We're in a series where we're teaching through the New Testament letter of James. And today, chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. Let me start with this. When most people go on a safari, they go in a Jeep. But not these two guys. These two guys, they went in a zebra costume. See what happens. You know, I imagine that was quite an adrenaline rush, but was that a good idea? Yeah, maybe you've never gone on a safari in a zebra costume, but have you ever made a bad decision? Have you ever made a bad decision of any kind? You know, maybe it's a relationship choice, foolish relationship choice. Or maybe you bought something that you shouldn't have bought. Or maybe you did something and now you look back at it and anything that fits under the general category of stupid. You're like, man, why did I do that? If so, this passage is for you. James 1, verses 5 and 6. I'm just going to read it to begin. It says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Well, wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom is not being innovative, or having a new angle, or having a new perspective. Wisdom is not the same thing as having knowledge or having a high IQ. Wisdom is the ability to make great decisions. Wisdom, the ability to make great decisions. It's the art of living well. I think, well, who doesn't want that? Well, how do we get that? Verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. If you want wisdom, you don't have to be brilliant. There are some really smart people who have made bad decisions. If you want wisdom, James is saying, here's what you need. You just need to have a humble, teachable spirit. Because the source of wisdom, well, it's not us. God puts it this way in Proverbs 9, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Wisdom begins with God. Wisdom begins knowing God. He's the source. Wisdom is knowing God. Wisdom is learning His teachings. Wisdom is integrating His ways into my daily decisions. He's the one who created this world that we live in, and so He's the one who knows how it best works. Verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, pause. James is specifically addressing people who lack wisdom. So if that's not you, if you are wise, and if you already have all the wisdom that you need, then this passage isn't for you. But let me see some hands. How many of you, when you hear this passage, when you hear in verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you think, me, I lack wisdom. I could sure use more of that in my life. See some hands. How many of you are like, yeah, because me too. I want more of that. I want more wisdom in life. Here's the good news. James is saying that, having your hands up to that question, that's where wisdom starts. That's where it begins. It begins with a belief in God and a humble recognition that I could sure use His help. I could sure use His help making decisions in my life. So how do I get that? Verse 5 continues, If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. Ask, ask, ask. We read that and it seems so simple, but it actually points to a deeper, less comfortable reality. Asking is also acknowledging, I don't have everything figured out. Asking is also acknowledging, I'm not sure I always know what's best. Asking is saying, God, I need help. It's saying, I need God's help. It's recognizing there is someone who is far wiser and more competent than me. Let's say you're on board so far. You're like, okay, I can admit that I don't have it all figured out. I can admit that I need help making some of the decisions in my life, and I do believe that there is a God, so I'm willing to humble myself. I'm willing to ask him for help. So when I do that, how is he going to respond? The passage continues. Verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all. He gives, he gives, he gives. It's a gift. There's no price tag here. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all, without finding fault. Without finding fault. That's an important part of this. Without finding fault, that means God's not going to say, I can't believe what you did. I can't believe you got into that mess. I mean, a while back I told you what to do, but no, you didn't do it. You didn't listen to me. You didn't obey me. You got yourself into this mess, and so now you are going to have to get yourself out. James is saying God is not like that. God, he cares about you. And he wants to help you. He wants to guide you. He wants to direct you. He wants to give wisdom into your life. Well, the passage continues with this, verse 6. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Anybody else hear that and think, bummer, looks like there's a catch? Right? Looks like we just found the fine print. Because when we ask for it, we have to ask and believe and not doubt. Well, that's a problem for a guy like me because I have doubts. I have doubts about a lot of things. I question the reliability of a lot of things that I see around me, like this. I saw this the other day and had a few doubts about this. Congress bans phones for teens. I don't know, there's something in me that says, I'm not so sure about that. That looks like fake news. I have doubts about this message that is out there. Disney, the happiest place on earth. I'm not so sure about that. I went there several years ago. Worst vacation ever. There were long lines. It was 104 degrees outside. Second ride. You know what happened to me? Second ride, I got motion sickness. Ride number 2, I was sick the rest of the day. Disney, happiest place on earth? I have some doubts about that. Doubts. I don't think having doubts and questions about some of the things we experience in life, I don't think that's all bad. You know, if we don't have doubts about anything, then we're going to be a sucker for everything. Abraham had doubts. Moses had doubts. John the Baptist had doubts. Doubts, here's what they are. Doubts are actually a prerequisite for faith. Well, they are. Think about that. Faith, it doesn't really take faith if we are 100% certain. Faith is required only in the presence of some doubt. So, what does this mean? Verse 6. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. The word James uses here for doubt, translated literally, it means to be double-minded. That's a bit different than maybe how we generally think about doubt today. Double-minded. A double-minded person is a person who hasn't made up their mind what they will do with the wisdom that they receive. Double-minded person would be saying something like this: God help me. God, give me wisdom. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the wisdom that you give, but I'd sure like to hear your suggestions. No. Wisdom isn't just knowing, and wisdom isn't just hearing. Wisdom is doing. I mean, it doesn't help to read a book on nutrition if you're not willing to change your diet, right? It's like, don't bother. It's not going to help if you go to a class on parenting if you're not willing to be open to doing some things different. See, the doubter or double-minded person that James is talking about here, this is a person who wants to hear but isn't committed to do. They follow God sometimes, when they like it, when they agree with it. Someone once put it this way. They said, wise people hear the truth and adjust their actions. Foolish people hear the truth and adjust the truth. Is there anything in your life, any truths that you're actually trying to adjust? Wisdom is deciding as God would decide. Wisdom is acting as God would act. Wisdom is living as God would live. Wisdom is something you know and something you do. Let me give you an example of a lack of wisdom. So there's a guy who went to a convenience store, and he put a $100 bill on the counter and asked for change. So the clerk opens up the register, and when they did, the guy pulls out a gun. It demanded all the money. So they took all the money out of the register, and then the thief took off, fled, forgot the $100 bill, left it on the counter, but took off. Do you know how much money this thief got from that register? $92. Which means stole, robbed a convenience store and lost $8. Unwise, right? Unwise. We said that is really unwise. When it comes to wisdom and making wise decisions in life, I think most of us would all agree, I want that. I want wisdom. I want wisdom from God. How do I get it? I don't think that it comes the way that I used to think it did. I used to think it works this way. We pray and say, hey, God, I need wisdom. God, grant me wisdom. I got this decision. Give me wisdom for this. And then I had this image of God just like downloading instantaneously the answer to me. Or God, just like boom, magic bullet. There it is. I have it all figured out, giving me some kind of a brain dump. But I'm not sure that's the way it works anymore. Because I don't think we can just sit in our house and ignore the universe and expect the wisdom fairy to just come knocking at the door. I don't think it works that way. God's really clear throughout the Bible. Tells us how we can get wisdom, where we can get wisdom. I'll share a passage with you. There are a whole lot more passages like this one. Psalm 119, verse 97 says, oh, how I love your law. By the law, they're referring to the Bible. I meditate on it all day long. Your commandments are always with me and make me wiser. There it is, wiser than my enemies. I have more insight than all my teachers. Why? For I meditate on your statutes. I have more understanding than the elders. Why? For I obey your precepts. Wisdom comes from seeking and from following God's word. You want wisdom? Open the Bible, open the Bible, open the Bible. People who want to grow in wisdom in life are people who spend a lot of time in here, in this book. There's a renowned preacher, Charles Spurgeon, from a generation or so ago, and he used to say this. He used to say, a Bible that is falling apart usually belongs to a person who isn't. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Sometimes, we can say things like, God, I need help. God, give me wisdom. And I imagine God's there saying, well, I already have. I've given you a whole book. Open the book, read the book, study the book, right? Talk about the book, follow the book, obey the book, get in groups with other people and talk about the book. It's already in there. Granted, reading the Bible doesn't always have a direct answer to my specific question, but the more time I spend listening to God, the more familiar I become with Him and with His ways and with His voice, and the more I begin to see life from His perspective. One more important thing that connects us back to the video that we began with, right? Wearing a zebra costume in the African plains. Is that a good idea? Is that wise? I mean, imagine in that moment, in that crisis moment, as the lions are attacking, as they're biting, as they're clawing, it would call out, God, help. God, give me wisdom. God, I'm asking. As the lions are attacking, would it be fair to say this? That's asking a little bit too late. We have this tendency to ask God for wisdom when we're right there facing the crisis. And that's okay. God invites us to go to Him during those times. But here's what can end up happening is for the non-crisis moments in life, we can lean on our own decision-making process. I think one of the reasons why we find ourselves in so many crisis moments is because we lacked wisdom at an earlier stage in the process. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every crisis that we face is because we lacked wisdom, but I do think it's fair to say that some of them are. There is wisdom in small things. There is wisdom in small decisions. There is wisdom in small choices. The minor daily decisions need wisdom just as much as the big life-changing ones do. The need for wisdom, it's not just when the lions are attacking. The need for wisdom comes when I see that zebra costume and think, should I? Is that a good idea? That's when we need wisdom. Practice using wisdom in the small daily decisions. Well, I made a mistake. Well, should I hide that or should I apologize for that? Well, no one's watching me. Should I cut the corner or should I have integrity? Someone hurt me. Should I hurt them back or should I give them grace? See, if I just relegate the need for God's wisdom only to the really big moments in my life, here's what happens. My ability to choose wisely will be underdeveloped. Making big, life-changing decisions and wanting wisdom in that, making those kind of decisions, I think it's a lot like shooting free throws. It's really important to practice ahead of time. The first time we ask for wisdom really shouldn't be right there in that crisis moment. It should be something that we do day in and day out. So then we'll just be a part of the rhythms of our life. Practice that. Practice asking God for wisdom every day in the small things. Practice, listening for God's guidance every day in the small things. Practice, following God's way every day in the small things so that we'll become intuitive for the big things. Do you see how God has designed this to work? Verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Whatever you are facing today, know this: God has not abandoned you. He wants to guide you. He wants to lead you. He wants to direct you. He wants to give you wisdom. Just look at Jesus. You know, Jesus, he left heaven and he came to this earth. And Jesus, he willingly sacrificed his life on the cross. And Jesus, on that third day, he was raised from the dead. And that is an indescribable gift that saves us and that redeems us and that gives us hope. But understand, that's not the only thing that he did. Jesus also taught. He taught. He gave parables and stories. He gave sermons and truths. He gave instructions and commands. Well, why? Why did he do that? He did that because he wants to help us. He wants to help us navigate through life in this confusing world. The Bible has a word for people who choose well. Not lucky, not fortunate, not intelligent. Wise. 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 Wisdom is the ability to make great decisions in big things and in small things. Wisdom is the art of living well. Wisdom is the art of pursuing and listening and following Jesus. So here's how we're going to close. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do what James is saying, to apply what James is saying, to give you the opportunity. We're going to create a little space, and I'm going to invite you to just ask God for wisdom. He's here. He's available. You have a direct connection to him. And so in the moments ahead, I invite you just to do that. Say, God, I'm hearing what you're saying here. I could use some of that. I want wisdom. Grant me wisdom. And maybe there are some things in your life today, some real specific things, decisions or challenges or things that you're in the middle of. You want his wisdom. Just ask him. Ask him for wisdom. Ask him for guidance. Ask him to lead. Go to him.